That evening, the corridor felt different, still shadowed, as though the very atmosphere was pausing to listen. I was returning from the kitchen cradling a cup of lavender tea when I noticed Michael standing there, my grandson. He remained motionless, silent, simply watching me with those eyes I'd known since childhood. But now they carried something unfamiliar, something I couldn't quite identify. Then he spoke words so unexpected, so profound, that the ground seemed to shift beneath me. I wasn't prepared for what he would say, yet perhaps I'd been waiting my entire life to hear it. Before I continue, I'm curious. Where are you right now? What city, what quiet corner of the world? I love knowing how far these simple stories reach. It had been an exhausting day. I'd spent hours organizing shelves, tending my plants, trying to distract myself from the oppressive August humidity that made every breath feel heavy. The ancient ceiling fan whirred lazily overhead, circulating warm air without truly cooling anything. I devoted the afternoon to sorting old photographs, most from an era when this house overflowed with voices and movement. These days, silence had become my most constant companion. Michael had been staying with me for several weeks while his parents traveled abroad. He was consistently courteous, helpful, gentle in that rare way some young men possess, bringing in groceries without prompting, asking about my day. But recently, something had changed. There was a new awareness in how he observed me, a longer hesitation when we conversed. Nothing I could articulate precisely, just a shift, subtle yet impossible to dismiss. That evening, I'd been preparing tea in the kitchen, the fragrance of dried lavender filling the small space. Outside, the sky had deepened to violet, daylight dissolving into the trees. I could hear the rhythmic pulse of insects, the occasional whisper of leaves in the warm breeze drifting through the partially open window. I walked down the corridor, my slippers barely audible against the hardwood. That's when I saw him, Michael, leaning against the wall just steps from my bedroom door. The overhead light was dark, only the amber glow from the living room lamp reaching partway into the hall, casting half his face in shadow. "Michael," I said gently, more curious than startled. "What are you doing here in the darkness?" He didn't respond immediately. He simply stood there, gaze unwavering as though gathering courage. I could hear the faint rhythm of the old wall clock, each second stretching longer than the last. My fingers tightened slightly around my cup, feeling warmth seep into my palm. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. "Grandmother, there's something I need to tell you." Something in his tone made my breath catch before I even knew what would follow. There was no casualness, no light conversation. It was serious, yet his eyes held no fear, only an openness that drew me in despite my uncertainty. I took a small step closer. "What is it, dear?" My voice emerged softer than intended, almost a whisper. He hesitated, glancing downward before meeting my eyes again. Then, with quiet conviction, he said, "You're the most important person in my life. More than anyone else. I thought you should know." Such a simple statement. Yet it landed deep inside me, awakening something dormant for years. I didn't know whether to smile, laugh, reach out, or ask why he was telling me this now. Instead, I stood there, feeling the tea's warmth against my palm, the closeness of the humid evening air, and the weight of his words settling over me like a blanket. "Michael," I began, but my voice faded. I was afraid of diminishing the moment with the wrong words. He stepped forward, closing the space between us by mere inches. "You've always been there for me," he said, eyes searching mine. "Even when I didn't deserve it, even when I forgot to say thank you. I've never properly told you what that means. I could feel my heartbeat, slow but strong, steady yet louder than usual. I wasn't certain if it was how he looked at me or the unexpected vulnerability in his voice. Perhaps both. "Michael," I said finally, a small smile forming. "You've always been special to me too, more than you probably realize." The hallway seemed to contract, walls drawing closer, air growing warmer. I sipped my tea just to occupy my hands, though my eyes never left his. Somewhere beyond, a car passed on the street, headlights briefly illuminating the window before fading. The world outside continued moving, but here, in this quiet moment, time seemed to have slowed just for us. I'd never been skilled at voicing my deepest feelings. Throughout my life, I'd been the listener, the caretaker, the steady presence others leaned upon. But hearing his words, so deliberate, so unrehearsed, made me realize how rare it was for someone to speak to me this way. It made me wonder what else remained unspoken between us. He shifted slightly, leaning one shoulder against the wall, eyes soft but steady. "You probably think it's foolish," he said almost shyly. "No," I replied, shaking my head. "Not foolish at all." What I wanted to say was that his words mattered more than he could comprehend. That in a world where days blur together and people forget to speak from the heart, this moment, his voice in the shadowed hallway, was something I would treasure. But I didn't say all that. Some things are better felt than explained. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The only sounds were the distant clocks ticking and the soft hum of the fan down the hall. I wasn't certain what would happen next, but I knew one thing. Something had fundamentally shifted between us, and there was no returning to what was. The tea remained warm in my hand when I realized I hadn't taken a full breath since Michael spoke. I set the cup on the console table, afraid my trembling fingers might spill it, and looked at him the way I used to examine my own reflection, holding steady, searching for the right words. "Come sit with me," I said, and the invitation felt like a bridge we could both cross. We moved to the kitchen because kitchens are where difficult truths feel less frightening. The overhead light hummed softly. I dimmed it so the room fell into that gentle amber glow that makes every corner feel welcoming. I refreshed my cup and poured him a glass of ice water. The ice cracked with small sounds that kept the moment from feeling overwhelming. He sat at the table, hands clasped, posture respectful without being stiff. I took the chair angled toward him, close but not across like an interrogation. We weren't here to challenge anything. We were here to understand. "You surprised me," I said, careful and honest. I don't often get surprised in good ways these days, but this was a wonderful surprise. He nodded, shoulders relaxing visibly. "I didn't know if I should say it," he admitted. "I didn't want you to think I was being, I don't know, dramatic." "Sometimes being dramatic is the bravest thing in a quiet house," I replied. And that made him smile. A small, grateful expression that softened his features and strengthened my courage. For a moment, we listened to the night, which had deepened since we left the hallway. The insects traded their evening songs. A neighbor's porch light switched off. Somewhere distant, a train horn called its lonely note and faded. I had lived a long time, yet the world still had new ways of saying hush. "You're the person who never talks to me like I'm about to fail," he said finally. "Everyone else does lately. Academic advisors, my father, even my friends when they think they're being honest. But when you talk, I feel capable. I feel possible. The word created a small ache in my chest. When you reach my age, people rarely speak to you like you're still becoming. They speak as though you're a museum piece, interesting, worthy of respect, but behind glass. To hear that word and feel it land not in my past but in my present made the room feel larger than it was. "Why now, Michael?" I asked. "Why tonight?" He took a breath that felt like gathering, not hesitating. "Because I was about to send a message I'd regret," he said, eyes on the table, fingers tracing the wood grain. "A message to someone who doesn't truly see me." I was angry this afternoon, about school, about finances, about everyone having opinions on who I should become. I almost did something that would make tomorrow worse. But then I thought of you. I thought of how you talk about weathering storms. How you always say, "Choose the action your future self will thank you for." So I stood in that hallway because I needed your tomorrow voice before I made a today mistake. I felt those words deep in my chest. They awakened a memory of the first time I learned to breathe through panic. A different hallway. A different summer. A small, frightened child in a world that demanded steadiness from a woman who felt anything but steady. "I remember how difficult it is to choose tomorrow when today is chaotic and overwhelming," I said. "I had to learn, sometimes the hard way, to be a place of calm." "I'm glad you came to me," I continued. "And I'm grateful you told me exactly what you meant. Clarity is a gift." He looked up. "So what do I do?" The words were simple, but I understood what he was truly asking. How do I hold this feeling without damaging it? How do I honor you without creating confusion? I folded my hands on the table. The skin there is thin now, veins drawing a map that tells more truth than my face ever could. "We name it," I said, "and then we give it proper space to exist." He leaned forward, attentive. "What you're feeling," I continued, "is love. Genuine. Love. Not the kind that makes someone foolish briefly and then vanishes. It's the kind built from showing up, from being witnessed, from seeing someone through all their seasons. You feel safe with me, and that's sacred. I feel honored by you, and that's healing. We can hold both, but we must call it what it is. I'm your grandmother. You're my grandson. That boundary isn't a barrier. It's the frame that keeps the picture intact. He exhaled, the sort of sound that carries both relief and the weight of being young. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, I can do that. We can do that, I corrected gently. Together. A silence followed, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was as though we'd moved furniture we hadn't realized was blocking the doorway. There was more space now. I stood to fetch a plate of the cookies. I'd baked that afternoon, pretending I hadn't made them because I'd sensed this conversation brewing all day. I placed them between us and watched him reach for the smallest one first. Careful, polite, the way his grandfather used to. You know, he said between thoughtful bites. I went into the garage earlier looking for that old drill. I found a box labeled letters. I didn't open it, but I held it. It was heavy. That box is heavier than it looks, I said, and we both smiled. They're not all love letters. Some are grocery lists that became prayers. Can I read them sometime? The ones you're willing to share? Please, I said, surprised by how quickly the word came. And in return, you can show me your sketchbook. I know you have one. Your fingers carry ink stains. Artists are always betrayed by their own hands. He laughed softly. Caught. Then his expression grew serious. I haven't been drawing much lately. I get trapped in my head about whether it's practical, whether I should be doing something more respectable. I took a cookie for myself. Respectability is a costume people wear when they're afraid someone might see who they truly are. Art isn't a costume. It's your soul learning another language. He nodded, and I watched the thought settle into spaces where doubt had been standing guard. Outside, thunder rumbled distantly. The forecast predicted storms around midnight. I could smell rain approaching, that particular metallic scent that precedes precipitation. I thought of how the garden would sigh with relief, how the roses would hold small pools in their petals, how tomorrow morning would begin with water falling from leaves like soft applause. Help me with something, I said, pushing my chair back. He followed me down the hall, past the photographs I'd left in loose stacks earlier. I stopped and selected one. In the image, I was a young woman, hair pinned haphazardly, standing beside a ladder while my husband pretended to check a gutter he'd already fixed, making our daughter laugh. Michael's mother was 3 in that photograph, chin held high, cheeks still round with childhood. That was a good day, I said. It looks like it, he replied. Then more carefully, do you miss being her? I considered the question. I miss not knowing yet, I said. There's sweetness in not knowing how the story unfolds, but I don't wish to return. The woman I was then didn't know how to be alone with courage. The woman I am now does. We carried the photos to the dining table and created 2 piles, stories I'd already shared and stories I hadn't yet found words for. He approached the task with reverence. I told him about the year the pipes froze, about the neighbor boy who built us a new mailbox from scrap wood, about the summer we slept on the porch when heat made the house unbearable. I told him how grief changes colors like a healing bruise and how laughter can surprise it into loosening its grip temporarily. I want to record these, he said suddenly. Actually record them, your voice. We could create audio chapters. I'll show you how. We could even make a book eventually. For the family. Maybe for someone out there who needs to hear how you made it through. The idea created warmth in my chest. Let's do it, I said. But there will be rules. He grinned. Of course there will. Rule 1, I began, counting on my fingers. We don't record after 10 at night when exhaustion has made us fragile. Rule 2, we tell the truth, but we tell it kindly. Rule 3, we stop when either of us needs space. Rule 4, we remember to eat cookies. That's a vital rule, he said solemnly. I'd add one more, I continued. We keep the door open when we're working late, not because there's anything to hide, but because transparency is a habit you build, even at midnight. I looked at him, and pride rose so quickly I had to steady myself against the chair. That's an excellent rule, Michael. We set the photographs aside and went to check the windows before rain arrived. In the living room, he pressed his palm against the frame to feel for drafts, and I watched his concentration, the way he belongs to a task when he commits to it. I saw the man he's becoming, generous and careful. I felt that same breathless ache from the hallway, but now it was gentled, named, given proper place to rest. Back in the kitchen, I rinsed our cups while he dried them, our movements easy, as though practiced 100 times. He asked if the creaky stairs still bothered me at night. I said yes, and he promised to fix it tomorrow. Small tasks are good medicine, he said, and I thought about all the medicines we forget: mending, listening, naming, tending. He hesitated then, returning to the beginning. I'm sorry if earlier felt strange. I wanted to express what I felt without making you uncomfortable. You didn't make me uncomfortable, I told him truthfully. You reminded me that being seen is different from being looked at. Being seen is an act of care. He stood there nodding, and then he did something simple and perfect. He reached out his hand, palm up, an invitation that asked nothing except to be met. I placed my hand in his for a moment, just a moment, felt the warmth of his skin, the slight tremor that says a person means what they say. Then we let go, mutual, respectful, clear. Good night, grandmother, he said. Voice steady now. Good night, Michael, I answered. And the words felt like a blessing I both received and gave. He went down the hallway to the guest room, and I stood in the kitchen listening to rain begin. It came gently at first, a music of soft taps, then gathered strength, painting the roof with a sound I've loved since girlhood. I turned off the light, and the house shrank to its constellations of small glowing dots, resting machines. In that darkness, I sat and let the night fold around me while I examined the new shape of my heart. He stopped me in the hallway tonight, but that isn't the complete truth. The truth is, he stopped me from shrinking around my solitude. He gave me language for a feeling I thought had aged out of me: importance. Not because I'm a relic to be venerated, but because I'm a living library, and he wants a library card. The truth is that love, when named correctly, doesn't steal your breath forever. It returns it to you in measured, steady gifts. I breathed more easily as minutes passed. I thought of my letters in the garage and his unused sketchbook and the ways we would build a bridge of small, ordinary days between us. Before bed, I wrote a note and attached it to the refrigerator for him to find in the morning. There's pancake batter in the fridge. Fix the stair first, or I'll hear you sneaking seconds. I smiled as I clicked my pen, knowing he would roll his eyes affectionately. I also added a second note where he wouldn't miss it. Tomorrow we begin the recordings. Working title: The Weather in Our Bones. In my room, I pulled the quilt to my chin and listened to steady rain. The house breathed with me. I thought of the frame around the picture we'd chosen tonight: grandmother and grandson, two people holding a boundary that enriches the image rather than diminishes it. I thought of all the hallways in my life and how many I'd rushed through. Tonight I didn't rush. I stood. I listened. I answered. When sleep finally came, it felt like a door opening rather than closing. I went through it with soft footsteps and a promise tucked under my tongue. Tomorrow we will choose actions our future selves will thank us for. And we will keep choosing again and again, until the hallway becomes not a place of stopping, but a place we pass through together. On our way to the table, the garden, the garage, the future where the kettle hums, the fan clicks, and the world outside our windows continues on and on.